Hello everyone. So far, all of the investing trackers I've released provide instant fetching of insights to see the latest snapshot of your investments. These insights include current price, daily change, market cap, and more. But how about analyzing performance over time? The only feature we currently have for this is a simplified sparkline, also known as a trendy chart. It's time to step it up. This is the Portfolio Performance Tracker, a tool that tracks your entire portfolio and individual asset movement over time. It includes dynamic charts that capture historical data movement and the benchmark feature to compare any asset against your portfolio or an individual asset you hold. This tracker works as an additional and integrated feature of the Portfolio Tracker's second generation through your transactions history. I've released two versions, one where you can connect it directly to your existing portfolio tracker via import range, and the other one where you can enter your transactions separately. The benefit of using an import range formula to get data directly from your portfolio tracker is that it will update automatically as you enter new transactions. The other cool thing about this tracker is that you can visualize a granular chronological record of your transactions. For example, see when you bought something, how the value changed, and the same when you sold it, among other statistics. A few caveats to note is that this tracker takes a lot of computing power to fetch historical data. That is why I have built it separately from the portfolio tracker. It includes available space to choose 10 assets to track. If you want to add more, it will become heavier and it will take more time to load everything. Hopefully Google Sheets catches up with our innovation practices in the future. If you invest in multiple countries, it's recommended you select assets from only the same market, as these functions don't take into consideration overlapping public holidays between different places. In the upcoming portfolio trackers, I will include a simplified feature of performance tracking to sustain more information in one place. If you would like to skip the tutorial and access this ready-to-use tracker in light, dark, matrix, and cyberpunk theme, make sure to visit my Patreon, which is linked in the description of this video. Before we start with the tutorial, I'll quickly show you how to get a copy of this tracker for you to use privately. For those who access this tracker from Patreon, the first thing you'll see is a protected version. You need to click File and then make a copy into your private account. If you downloaded the import range formula, you just need to go to the Transactions tab and edit the formula on the top. Get the URL of your personal portfolio tracker and paste it over the sample one. The first time you change it, you will get an error message. When you select the cell range, you just need to click Allow Access to get the import range function to work. If you downloaded the manual version, go to the Transactions tab, select all the transactions, and remove them by pressing the backspace or delete key. It is now set up to start using. Now, let's learn how to build this portfolio performance tracker from the beginning. Okay, so we're gonna go to Google Sheets and start with a blank new spreadsheet. And the first thing that we're going to do is go to our original portfolio tracker, and we're going to transfer the Transactions tab into this one. So we've got the portfolio tracker, the second generation. You've probably seen it before. We've got the dashboard, mobile tab, portfolio, filtered portfolio, and the transactions. So this is what we want. We want the Transactions tab. So what you're going to do is right click the tab and then copy to existing spreadsheet. And what you're going to do is transfer it to our portfolio performance tracker. This is what you need to do if you want the manual version. If you want to do the other version, which is the transactions via import range, what you're going to do next is open up a new tab. And then we're going to go to transactions again. We're going to select everything. Click the paint format symbol, go to where we want to do the import range and just select everything. So we're just formatting it first. And now what we're going to do is enter the import range formula here. So this is the formula that you want to enter, import range, and in quotations you enter the spreadsheet URL of your transactions tab, then the tab name, which is transactions, and then from column A to W. Well, I've already done it before, so I didn't get an error message, but if you do get an error message, you just need to click this again and then select Allow Access, and then you'll get the results. So whichever way you choose, just follow the instructions, and now we're going to continue with the performance data. A lot of the formulas that I'm going to be entering here, they all go back to the Transactions tab. specifically when it's named transactions. So if you're using the formula sheet, just make sure that your transactions tab or sheet is called that way. If not, you're going to have to change the text in the formulas. As you can see, the manual version is the one that's called transactions. So every formula that I enter will be capturing the information from this one and not from the import range transactions. So what I'll do for this section is enter all the column headers that we need, and then I'll continue with the formulas. Remember that you can access all the formulas from the formula sheet I'll provide in the description of this video. So as you can see, I left a space between F and G because here's where we're going to enter the Google Finance function that gives us the historical data. Once we complete a lot of this section, what we'll do is link this to the next section, which is the dashboard. And in cell I2, I'm entering a formula as a column header. So I am selecting cell F1, which is the ticker that we're choosing for the benchmark. And then in quotations, I'm writing down price, P&L, percentage. The column header shows up as the ticker that you write, then price, P&L, percentage. And if you ever change this to whichever benchmark you want, then the column header changes as well. Again, in cell O2, I'm going to enter a formula, and this one is just going to say the close price, but in the currency that we choose from the dashboard. So obviously we haven't created the tab called performance, so let's create one. And at the moment, as you can see, it's empty, but if we go to cell C4, let's enter here USD. And now in performance data, you're going to see that it says close USD. And we do the same in column P, but selecting the asset name that we choose and then the currency. I opened many columns all the way to KC because to fit 10 assets, we're going to need all this space. But don't worry, we're just going to enter the column names up until the main one, and then it's all about just copying and pasting the same thing across all the columns. So I believe that's what you need for column names with formulas. I'm now going to paste the rest that we need from W. Just make sure you're entering them exactly where I'm entering them. So that's row 2, and it should reach all the way to column AH. That's for the main section. So as you can see, we've got the total portfolio from A to E. We've got the benchmark, which is from F to I. And then we've got the main ticker, which is from J all the way to AH. Now in column AI, we're going to paste what we did for the benchmark. So go back to the benchmark section and copy from F all the way to I. And then we go to column AI and paste it here. Basically, we need two benchmarks, one that compares it to our portfolio, and then another one that compares it to our individual assets from this section. Once we have this second benchmark, then we're going to do the same, but with the main asset. So we go here to XOM and select the 2 rows all the way to AH and paste it in AM. And there's one more thing I forgot for the titles, and that is to enter the letter A in cell L1. Just like we did for H1, and let's just make sure that the second benchmark has it, and then we need another one, AO1. I'm just entering the letter A here as an identifier to get the dates in the section for the total portfolio, but you'll see this later when we work with the formulas. Okay, so these are the initial column titles that we need from A all the way to BK. So it seems like a lot, I know, but don't worry. Now we're just gonna start entering formulas, and the rest is just about copying and pasting. So we're gonna skip the total portfolio and the first benchmark, and we're going to start with the first asset. So we're going to be using a Google Finance function, and we're just selecting the ticker, getting the price, and here we use a minifs formula that scans through our transactions and gives us the most recent date where this ticker was traded. And we want to get the historical price from this time all the way to today on a daily basis. And as you can see, the column header for J and K fills up automatically with a formula. So like I said, it's date and then the close price. So this is scanning through the transactions for this specific ticker just to check which currency we used. In this case, we bought ExxonMobil with US dollars. And here what we're doing is just a currency conversion. So if the local currency that we have is the same as the currency that we want in the performance dashboard, we're going to use the same close price. If not, we're then going to do an exchange with the currency that we chose. Now what I'm going to do next is quickly enter all the formulas that we need for the remaining cells, and then I might explain a few, but don't get too worried if the first time you paste something you get an error, because a lot of these formulas skip from left to right. So once you enter them all, you should be able to see the results that you want. So as you can see, every formula that we've entered is still 0, because the main thing that we want is the rolling quantity and the rolling cost. This is the formula for the rolling quantity. We're basically using the rolling quantity calculation that we make in the transactions to take into account when you buy something, when you sell it, what's remaining, etc. This specific column has actually two formulas. In the first row, you enter this formula, and then in the second row, you enter a different formula. These formulas are quite similar. The only difference is this last value here. So if there's an error, it's going to make it 0 for the first row. And then from all the other rows onwards, if it's an error, it's just going to get the row from above. So what you want to do is drag it from this one all the way to the bottom. If we didn't have this section here with two formulas, it would just find the rolling quantity that we have for the specific date, but then in the next row, if it's not there, it will be a 0. And for the recurring value, the performance tracking that we want to always see the value and just how it increases over time or decreases. And just like with the rolling quantity, we do the same with the rolling cost, so two different formulas. So this section here is one of my favorite ones. This is really cool because here you can see the actual movement in a chronological order. So you can see on which day exactly you bought something. It compares the difference between the closing price and the amount that you bought it for. So in this hypothetical example that I put in, we actually bought the asset for a cheaper price than what it closed as. So that's really good. And it tells you the quantity you bought and then the value of this. And if you sold something, it would show you that specific information. So let me just change this to Apple. And as you can see, I have a sell transaction for Apple. And it shows you the price at which you sold it at, the difference. So in this case, Apple closed at $149, but we sold it at $152. So that's really good. The quantity that you sold, the value, and then that profit or loss. So we made $3 in this one. And then as you can see, the next day we bought another 2 shares. And yeah, it's a really cool way to just see the movement of your transactions, a bit of a chronological way, and understand the movement in a better way than through the transactions. Now let's continue with the benchmark. I'm going to work on the benchmark for the individual assets. So we're using the Google Finance function again, and here we're linking the initial date to the initial date from the first individual asset that we're comparing. So we want to compare them in the same period of time. That's why we're using this specific date. And that is it for the individual benchmark. Now we continue with the rest of the individual assets. Like I said, you just need to copy and paste. And we're gonna select from J all the way to AH. And then while pressing the shift button, you wanna select the command or control and then the down arrow. And then select all the way to row 1000. We're gonna copy that, and then we're gonna scroll to column AM where the individual portfolio assets start, and we paste it. And now we get the same data that we had for Exxon, but we have it for Apple. So now that we have our first asset here, after the benchmark comparisons, we're going to prepare it to be copied across all of these. Before we do that, we want to use some data validation here. So go to data, data validation, and in the list from a range, you're going to enter the following formula. So we're selecting a list that we're gonna make from the performance tab in column S. So click OK. Should be empty at the moment, so we're gonna go to performance, and in S3 we're gonna enter the asset list, and we're going to enter the following formula in S4. So we're using a combination of unique and filter to scan through the tickers in our transactions and select the unique ones while excluding the cash tickers. So then it gives us a list of all the assets that we've bought. And now if we go back to performance data, we can see that in the data validation, we get all the list of tickers that we have. So now what we're going to do is start copying this whole section across the rest of the tracker to fill up the space for the assets that we own. So we want to select from AM all the way to BK, then again Shift, Command or Control down, copy it, go to BL1 and paste it. And as you can see, when we paste it, the data validation is also pasted, so that way we don't have to do it over and over. And here what we're going to do is to select a different asset, and I'm going to delete this guide because we don't need it for this one. And you just want to do the same. Now paste it here. And again, we change it to the next asset that we want. And you don't really need to copy it again because it's already copied in the clipboard. So you just scroll to the next available space and paste it. And like I said in the demonstration, it is recommended to just enter the tickers for a specific market. That's what I'm going to do in this tutorial. So I'm going to delete Coca-Cola because we already have it. And we're just going to copy it again and then just continue pasting without a ticker, because that takes less computing power from our tracker. It's up to you. Based on your transactions, you can continue entering the tickers that you want, but in my case, I'm going to leave it blank because I just want it to perform better when I'm recording this video. So yeah, we're just gonna continue pasting. Like I said, I did it all the way until column KC. It's up to you if you want to keep on going based on the amount of assets that you want to track. And like I mentioned, it can get a bit slow when you add more than 10, but give it a crack, try it out, and hopefully it's not too slow. It also depends when you bought the asset. If you bought it 3 years ago, you're going to get more than 1,000 rows, but I'm just going to leave it until column KC. So now that we pasted everything, you can see that we have the individual asset for comparison, the benchmark for the individual asset, and then the portfolio assets that start from AM all the way to KC. At the moment, I have Apple, Coca-Cola, and Exxon selected as my assets. The rest of them are blank. And we can continue now with the total portfolio. So this is a really cool formula. It took me a while to figure it out, but essentially what we're doing is scanning from where our assets start, so AM, all the way to the end for the date value. And as you can see, this is why we entered this identifier, the A. So I'm running it down here in the criteria. And then we're scanning again, looking to create a sequence of working days. So we're going to exclude weekends. And as you can see, when I enter, it shows me a list of all the dates. I'm just going to change the format. If for some reason you want to track things like cryptocurrencies that are not bound to weekday trading, you can remove this section and it'll give you every single day. This is the section that I'm not very happy with, but it is what I had available at the time. It's not ideal. I would prefer to work with a query function to get it, but I just couldn't figure it out yet. So potentially in another version. But as you can see, we're scanning through each of the portfolio asset sections for the date and the rolling value at that time. And as you can see, we have it for Apple, we have it for Coca-Cola, and for all the columns that we entered. Like I said, I did it only for 10. If for some reason you're adding more than 10, just replicate this same format by changing the column letters and continue just adding more and more and more. And just like with the rolling quantity and rolling cost calculations, we have two formulas in this column. So as you can see, now we get the value of our total portfolio by adding all the total value columns together, and you can see the movement of everything. And we have two formulas for the total portfolio cost using the same logic. So there it is, that is the total portfolio section. It's basically adding up all the numbers in value and cost, and then we just calculate the profit and loss in dollar value and in percentage value. So this is the main overall portfolio performance over time. Finally, we can work on the benchmark for the portfolio because we can only do it once we have the figures for the total portfolio. As you can see, we're using Google Finance, and for the start date, we're using the start date of all the dates. So out of all the assets in our portfolio that we chose, the first one starts on the 31st of August. Therefore, the benchmark requires to start at that same date. And that is about it for the performance data tab. Okay, so let's continue with the performance tab. What I'm going to do first is enter a few titles and just the main skeleton of the dashboard. And then once we finish that, then we can continue with the charts. This symbol is delta. In other words, it just means the change. And then we get the percentage change. Okay, so here we want to have a custom date, and I like it when you double click and you get a calendar. So to do that, we go to data validation, and then the criteria, select date. Whenever you click this, you get a calendar and you can choose the date that you want. For the latest date, we're going to use this formula, index counter, and it's essentially going through all the dates that we have in the total portfolio and getting the last one available. We then use the functions index and match to scan through the transactions, column B, which is the value, and then matching the date that we have, so the custom date, with the dates in column A. So as you can see, the 2nd of June, our total portfolio value is 6,360. If we go to performance data and scroll to the 2nd of June, you can see that there it is, 6,363. It's just another way of using a VLOOKUP, but I prefer index match. And then we use the same formula, but then capturing the latest date. Now that we have the main 4 values that we care about, then we can just compare the differences, or the deltas, between one and the other. So this one's pretty cool. It's basically subtracting the dates, the custom and the latest, and then adding the days text after. And then we simply subtract the latest minus the custom. For the percentage change, all we do is divide latest by custom and then subtract 1. So we do it for these two, market value and cost. And then for the profit and loss, we use this formula that's quite similar, but it's an if statement. So if the custom is less than 0, it's just going to be blank because we can't really divide by a negative. And then if not, it's going to continue with the operation. Okay, so now we can go to the benchmark comparison. So we're always going to enter the benchmark from this cell, and all the other benchmark tickers that we have in performance data are going to be linked to this cell. So here we're going to use the same benchmarks, so we just link it to this one. And then for asset, we want to be able to select one of the assets that we own. Just go to data validation, and select the range that you have in column S. I like to leave it all the way to the bottom, so S4 to S. That way, if we add more tickers in the future, it'll capture it automatically. And as you can see, our tickers are there. So before we continue with the charts, I'm just going to link the tickers from performance data to these ones. So this is the first benchmark against the portfolio. So we just link it back to performance. This is the asset that we're choosing. So we link this back to performance to the dropdown that we just created. And finally, the benchmark for the individual asset. Again, we link it. You can link it here or here, it doesn't matter. This one's also linked to this one. There it is, and the rest is good to go. So that's about it for the skeleton. All we're missing now is the charts. So I'll quickly format this and then I'll be back so we can create the charts. Okay, so here it is. And as you can see, I just grouped column S, just in case you don't want to see it, you can just hide it. And we don't really need the rest of the columns, so I'm just going to delete them. And I'm also going to delete a few from the bottom, so probably from row 41 all the way to 1000, just going to delete them. As you can see, all I did was add a few background colors, borders, and then I added some conditional formatting to the change formulas. So if you go to format, conditional formatting, you can see that the format rule that I applied was if the value is greater than 0, make it green, and if the value is less than 0, make it red. Okay, so we're going to start with the first chart. So go to insert, chart, and what we want is a line chart. Now for the data range, we're going to go to performance data and select from A2 all the way to E2, and then with shift control or shift command, we go down all the way to the last one, click OK. For the series, we're going to remove them all at the moment. X-axis would be the dates, and then for the series, we want first the market value, then the cost, and then the profit and loss. Now it looks a bit strange because the profit and loss is obviously lower than the total market value. It would be nice if it was that high. So what we're going to do is go to customize, series, select profit and loss, and we're going to change the axis to the right axis. As you can see, the profit and loss was negative just at the beginning, but then with the power of compounding and the market conditions, it went up. Now, for the second chart, it's going to be very similar to this one, so might as well select it, copy it, and then paste it. And then in the settings, we want to remove all the series and just add the profit and loss percentage. And now we're going to go with the benchmark comparison charts. So we're going to go to insert, chart, and for the data range, again, we're getting it from the performance data. And the first one that we want to select is column A, so all the dates. The second one that we want, column E. And the last range that we want is column I, so the benchmarks, profit and loss. And again, we're going to remove all the series. X-axis is all dates. And then series, we want the total portfolio and the profit and loss. I'm going to make it a line chart. And I'm going to make the portfolio line a bit thicker. So then again, we just duplicate this graph and we're going to select a different data range for the asset versus benchmark comparison. And we're going to go again to performance data. The first one that we want is the dates from the asset that we're choosing. So go to column L. Now we want the profit and loss for that same asset. So that's column S. And finally, if we scroll to the right, we get the benchmark for the individual asset. And again, the profit and loss for this one. So L, S, and AL. And we can see that the x-axis and the series are fine. It is choosing Apple and the S&P 500 index. Lastly, we can remove the grid lines and it looks quite nice. Now let's test it. So we have the benchmark. Let's say we don't want to compare it with an index, but with another stock. We enter it, let it load. And as you can see, now we're comparing the Tesla price profit and loss versus our portfolio profit and loss. And then we're comparing the asset that we had chosen before, Apple, with the same benchmark, Tesla. Let's say we change it to Exxon. And now we can see how Exxon has been performing way better than Tesla. So yeah, it's pretty dynamic. And the cool thing about it too is that we can change the currency. Or you can technically enter the currency that you want manually, but I prefer to have it with some data validation. So just go to data validation, and we want a list of items. And here you can enter all the currencies that you want to compare with. So I just enter a few of the major ones. And as you can see, now we get them in a dropdown. So let's say we want to compare it to Canadian dollars. So now all the values have changed to Canadian dollars. And if we go to performance data, I'll just give you an example with Exxon. Exxon is traded in the US, so the prices are in US dollars. And we are converting it to Canadian dollars. So now all the rolling value and cost and profit and loss are in Canadian dollars. And this is translated to the performance statistics as well as the charts. So it's pretty cool if you want to see your performance in other currencies, just to understand the differences between one and the other and how it changes due to the exchange rate. So that is it for the portfolio performance tracker. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you find this tracker useful to gain more insights for your investing journey. Stay tuned for the next trackers, and feel free to send me any feedback, suggestions, and we can brainstorm together for more improvements. Thank you very much. This is Planet Finance. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, happy learning.